All right, guys, as I told you, I have recorded the remainder of this PowerPoint so that you can get down both the notes and also listen to the commentary. Now, I'm going to try to be brief with my comments, and I'm going to allow for you to just pause when you need to catch the notes or like write down the notes. However, it's important for you to understand how some of these events connect to larger trends of what we are discussing, because it is going to be important when it comes to your final exam. All right, so we left off talking about Worchester versus Georgia, which is where the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Native Americans not having to listen to laws of the state, but the Andrew Jackson and his administration did not listen to that, which ultimately led to the Indian Removal Act. Now, the Indian Removal Act stated that all Native American tribes needed to move west of the Mississippi River. Here's the connecting thing that you need to add to your notes, which is the motivation for why we wanted Native Americans, or why the U.S. government wanted Native Americans to move west of the Mississippi. It's because of that expansion in the cotton gin plantations. Because that land is going to become so much more valuable, it was viewed that Native Americans were not using the land to its full potential, and therefore should move out west where cotton was not going to be as plentiful, mainly due to not being as humid. Now, some tribes are going to move. The Cherokee do not move. And they were then forced to move on the Trail of Tears. This is where the U.S. government came in and forced all Cherokees out of their homes, moved them out to Oklahoma. Thousands died, at least 4,000, as many as 8,000 of the 17,000 Native Americans that were on the Trail of Tears died. It's seen as a massive catastrophe, and this is in the name of cotton plantation expansion. Because Andrew Jackson was so divisive, a new political party is going to start. And that political party is led by Henry Clay. I told you would hear from Henry Clay. Now, you got to think of Henry Clay as the guy who created the American system. What was the American system? It wanted to increase infrastructure. It wanted to create business in the North. It was seen as a very pro-Northern businessman. America, not necessarily the Southern. So we're starting to see a division in our political parties based off of North and South. The South is having these competing interests because they don't want tariffs, they don't want infrastructure, whereas Henry Clay and his Whig party do. So Democrats are going to be with Andrew Jackson. The Whigs are going to be more of a Northern party. And the reason why they opposed Andrew Jackson, though, was because of his abuse, they thought, of presidential power. They were actually called the Whigs because that was a political party that was named after an English political party who had opposed the king. But now we have a two political party system, the Whigs, which support Northern businessmen, and then the Democrats of Andrew Jackson, which support the Southern farmers. All right. One event, though, that is very confusing is the nullification of 1832. There were two tariffs created, one called the Tariff of 1828, the other called the Tariff of 1832. The South hated both these tariffs so much, and when Andrew Jackson was elected president, they really thought Andrew Jackson was going to get rid of these tariffs. Remember, he's elected 1828. So Tariff of 1828 is passed. They think Jackson's going to get rid of it, and Jackson instead does not get rid of this tariff, and this makes the South very upset. South Carolina in particular, and so because of that, they threatened to secede, separate from the United States. And the reason why they're saying they're going to secede is because they believe in this idea called nullification, which is that if a state does not agree with a federal law, then they can disregard it. They do not have to follow it. However, Henry Clay, again, Henry Clay, very important. The Whig Party are going to say, no, that power does not rest with the states. Who does it rest with? It rests with the Supreme Court. So you need to remember that the Supreme Court decides what's constitutional or not the states. They did have some precedent with this, with the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions. The Kentucky and Virginia resolutions were about the Alien and Sedition Acts, which stated that these states did not want to follow those because they thought that they were against the Constitution. They were right. They were against the Constitution, but they could not just not follow a federal law. States have to follow a federal law. This was ultimately setting up a precursor to another debate on slavery. This is really why the nullification crisis was such a big deal, because states were trying to establish legal precedent that they did not have to follow federal law because they were afraid that the federal government was going to outlaw slavery. Ultimately, the tariffs are going to be resolved by Henry Clay, again, with the compromise tariff, which is going to lower them, but it is going to create the Force Act. And the Force Act stated that the president has the power to enforce federal law through force. Ultimately, this is just going to show that sectionalism is getting worse and worse. All right, and then the last major event involving Andrew Jackson is going to be the bank. Andrew Jackson did not think that the bank was constitutional. Again, this goes back to he's a strict constitutionalist like Thomas Jefferson, and he doesn't see anything in there that says that there should be a national bank. He also thought that the bank was run by these super wealthy, super industrious men, and that they were against him because he wasn't for them. He's for the poor farmer, as he puts it. And these guys are all about East Coast big business. So he is not going to pass its renewal. The renewal is going to come up while he is president, and he is going to veto it. But now the question becomes, what happens to all of the money that went into the National Bank? The National Bank had tons and tons of money. All of a sudden, it's going to shut down. Well, Andrew Jackson sets up state banks, and he gives all the money to the bank owners who are most loyal to him, which he calls pet banks. These guys, a lot of them were not very honest. They were pretty corrupt, and they are going to steal a lot of the money, honestly. And so because of that, people don't trust these banks. So foreign investment goes down, inflation goes up. A lot of state banks are going to close, and this created actually a massive nationwide depression.